guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chelsea. This is your first time here. So today's video is going to be my son Sebastian's birth story. I do want to go ahead and preface and say that some of the details in this may be TMI or things that you don't necessarily want to hear, but I am going to be telling the real raw story of what happened when I had my son, and at the end of this video I am going to have pictures of me actually having Sebastian, and because it was via C-section we were able to see everything. I'll get into that later, but there will be pictures at the end of this video of our first moments with Sebastian. I am a mother to two little boys. Sebastian is 2 years old, and I also have a 5-month-old son named Matteo. I do have his birth story recorded. I will go ahead and link it here. And make sure if you tune into that video to stick till the end, because you'll also get a sneak peek into our first moments with Matteo. But this story is for Sebastian. So we're gonna rewind 2 years ago. October of 2016, we found out that we were pregnant and we would be having a baby boy. And we quickly came up and decided on a name, obviously Sebastian. But it was something that my husband and I had discussed. We were planning, and so we have names for boys, and now we have a girl's name, or we're just waiting to have the girl. So we conceived Sebastian, and my pregnancy was very healthy and normal. I did not have any sort of morning sickness. I did have aversions to coffee. I did not drink coffee for 5 months, which is crazy to think about at this point, being a stay-at-home mom to two little crazy boys. The coffee is what gets me through the day, but during that time, coffee was not my best friend. So I did have a food or drink aversion, I guess, to coffee. It just didn't really make me feel well. It was generally something that I drank at the beginning of the day without anything on my stomach, but I didn't have any sort of nausea, morning sickness, anything like that. So my pregnancy was fairly healthy, and we were in the hospital a few times prior to actually having Sebastian, so I will get into that part of his story now. So we're going to go ahead, I guess, fast forward to 36 weeks pregnant. It was a Thursday, the beginning of July. I want to say it was the 7th of July, the 6th or the 7th. And I remember going into the bathroom, and when I went to wipe, there was blood in the toilet. And for me, any sort of blood, especially that close to giving birth, is scary for a first-time mom. I didn't know what to expect. Now that I've had 2 children, I've done my research, it was considered what's called a bloody show, which is generally when your mucus plug comes out, and sometimes it can be a sign that labor is coming. Sometimes the mucus plug can kind of create its barrier again, and it can happen multiple times within your pregnancy. But this was the first time in 8, almost 9 months that I had seen any sort of blood. So I called my on-call, and they told me, let's just go ahead and go into the hospital. Let's see what's going on and make sure, that you're doing okay. And I did go into the hospital, and I was actually having active labor contractions at 36 weeks. And I was a little scared. We weren't ready to have him. I was ready for him to be here, but obviously he wasn't considered full term yet. For those of you who don't know, full term is generally 37 weeks and on, is when most doctors are comfortable with allowing you to deliver a baby. So my doctor said that she didn't want for Sebastian to come out. If he came out at that point, they would have to give him a steroid shot because his lungs were not fully developed. There's a lot of growth that happens within the last 2 to 4 weeks of a baby being inside of the womb. And so they decided that because I was having active labor, they were going to give me a shot of terbutaline, which would then stop the labor contractions and kind of reset my body so that I would not have this baby early. So we were in the hospital for a couple of hours. It was just a bloody show. It was my mucus plug, but apparently I was having active labor contractions or early labor contractions, and I wasn't necessarily in any sort of pain when it came to like having the contractions. It was almost as if my body was experiencing it, but I wasn't feeling any sort of the pain associated with actual childbirth. So that weekend we went to dinner with a family friend on Saturday, and I remember we went to Chili's, and my husband and the family friend were drinking, having a couple of beers, talking, and I had a sudden pain. And because I had already had this scare on Thursday, I was a little bit more heightened to what my body was experiencing, because as a first-time mom, again, I didn't know what to expect when it came to labor. I didn't know what contractions felt like. I didn't know what was normal and what wasn't. And so I started to have a really, really, really bad back pain. And I didn't necessarily feel Sebastian moving around too much, but I did have in my lower back just a lot of pain and pressure, and just something that I hadn't experienced throughout my pregnancy. So, I kind of looked at my husband in that moment and said, "Can we go? I'm not really feeling good. I really feel like I need to lay down." So we leave the restaurant and we go home, and that pain, whatever that was, passes. Tuesday morning rolls around, and again, this is where the TMI comes in. I woke up just like every other day. I got ready for work, put my makeup on, brushed my teeth, all of that fun stuff, and it was time for me to get, dressed. So I removed my underwear, and I'm walking into the closet to pick out what I was gonna wear, and went into my drawers to get the underwear that, I would wear during the day, and I had fluid come out of me. And at the time I was like, oh my God, could this be my water? I had no idea. I didn't know what that felt like. Again, I didn't know what it was supposed to be. A lot of people explain that it's like a gush of water. Some say it's just a trickle and it continues because it just has a little bit of a leak. So I wasn't really sure what it was. Again, this was before hours at the doctor's office. And so I called the on-call, and they said, go ahead and go into the hospital. We'll check and see if it was your fluid, and we'll go from there. And I said, okay. So this was the following Tuesday. So it had literally been 5 or 6 days at this point from going to the hospital. I believe it was the 11th of July. So we go into the hospital, they check me, and it was not my fluid, it was just discharge. And when you're pregnant, your body temperature is a lot higher, and so the fluids inside of you, are warmer, and it can change the viscosity. So instead of it being like a thicker discharge, which is what women normally anticipate or experience, this was more liquidy because I had been sleeping, and my body temperature was higher than what it normally is when I'm not pregnant. So it turned out that it was just discharge. But at this point, my midwife did check my cervix, and I was 37 weeks at this point. And when she checked me, she kind of gave me a puzzled look, and she says, I'm not really sure what position Sebastian is in at this point. And I said, okay. And she said, we're gonna go ahead and call an ultrasound tech down and have an ultrasound to see what's going on with him. And so I got a little bit nervous, and they just wanted to make sure that I had fluids, and that there was enough fluid still, and that the amniotic sac hadn't, ruptured, or, that the fluid was low, whatever it was. So I go in to have the ultrasound, and the ultrasound confirmed that Sebastian had flipped BREECH. So the Thursday before that I had gone into the hospital, the midwife also checked me, and she said that he was head down, everything was fine. And then Tuesday I go into the hospital, and she says, we need to have you checked. The ultrasound confirmed that he had flipped BREECH. So at this point, I had a head in my ribs, and his bottom was in position to come out of me first. And I started to freak a little bit, and so they discharged me from the hospital, and I had a follow-up appointment at the doctor's, and my mom came with me to the appointment. And one of the things that I had said throughout my entire pregnancy was I did not want to have a C-section. I think that was one of the scariest things. At the time, I wasn't educated to realize that I could still go on to have a vaginal birth after. I just thought this was it. I was gonna have a C-section, and I didn't know if I'd be able to have more children, or how I would be able to have more children, whether I would have to continue to have C-sections, or if I would be able to actually have, give birth vaginally. Again, I wasn't educated about any of this at that point. So I go into the doctor's office and meet with my midwife, who is absolutely amazing. She was there for Sebastian's birth, and she actually caught Matteo as he came out of me. She was the absolute greatest. She sat down with me and kind of explained my options. And I was in tears. It was the last thing that I wanted. I was worried about having a C-section. It's major surgery. A lot of people kind of look down on moms that have C-sections, and it's unfortunate because regardless of how this baby comes into the world, you have still housed this baby inside of your body for 9 months, and you're still giving birth, whether it's through major surgery or the more natural accepted way of having a baby seemingly is vaginally. And I felt like that opportunity had been taken from me. So I guess to rewind a little bit to that pain that I was experiencing on Sunday, it made sense to me in that moment that he flipped breech. The pain that I experienced and the discomfort and everything was that, Sebastian decided, you're not gonna let me come out, and you're gonna give me a shot, and I'm not allowed to come out, let me try the other way, is what we jokingly say. So we have a conversation with my midwife, and she, named off a couple of options, going to the chiropractor, acupuncture, and there's a procedure that they do called an ECV, which is a manual way of trying to flip the baby. So pressure is applied to your stomach, and you flip the baby, or attempt to put them into a head down position. I guess there are also moves called spinning baby, which is where, you do certain moves on all fours that can help kind of flip the baby. She gave me a couple of exercises to do with that as well. So those are my options. Acupuncture and going to the chiropractor weren't something that I was really open to or comfortable with, especially as late in my pregnancy. I know a lot of women go to the chiropractor and have acupuncture to help go into labor, and I think that I was fearful of experiencing those things, and I chose not to have the ECV. And this is my personal opinion, it's my feeling on it. So if you've had this performed before and you're watching my video, please don't take this as any sort of shame. This is just my opinion on ECV, is that I did not want to manipulate my baby. He switched to that position. He flipped for a reason. I don't know what that was. To this day, I don't know what that is. But for me to be comfortable, I did not want to play God, so to speak. If Sebastian wanted to be, breech, then that was just what it was, and I didn't want to manipulate that. There are some risks that come with having an ECV performed. You do get an epidural because it can be very painful. You do have a risk of detaching the placenta from your body, and also rupturing the amniotic fluid, the bag of fluids that holds the baby. And those were risks that I wasn't willing to take. And at the same time, there's only a 50% chance that the baby will actually flip and then stay in that position. And we chose not to. I did do some of the exercises that she recommended, and so we went ahead and scheduled my C-section for 39 weeks. And the plan was, obviously, 39 weeks, I would go in and have a C-section, we would have my baby. And the Wednesday before, so I turned 39 weeks on a Thursday, and which would have been the 27th of July, and the Wednesday before I was supposed to go in for pre-testing to the hospital and kind of get registered and all of that kind of stuff for them to expect our arrival on Thursday. So fast forward a couple of weeks, I was trying to do the spinning babies exercises. I wasn't 100% knowledgeable about the certain exercises that you can do, but I did use YouTube as a resource to, do certain exercises, and so I attempted to do those things. The Monday before, the 24th of July, is my husband's cousin's birthday, and he was turning 21. And we had been out and about. I don't know if we were running errands or where we were coming from, but I remember on the way to my husband's aunt and uncle's house, we were in the car, and I was having contractions. And they were just random sporadic contractions. They did cause me to lose my breath, but they were about every 15 to 20 minutes, so nothing crazy. But for some reason I did know that they were contractions, but I wasn't freaking out by any means because of how far apart they were. And to be experiencing them, it was kind of exciting, but I was a little nervous. So we go over to celebrate my husband's cousin's 21st birthday. We have cake, we're just kind of talking and hanging out, all of that fun stuff. And we go home for the evening. When we got home, I was doing laundry. I had washed all of Sebastian's clothes, all of his blankets, swaddles, all of that kind of stuff. And we were folding everything up. And because we had 2 scares prior, our bags were packed, except for like the last minute essentials that you keep in the bathroom that we use on a daily basis. So that night we come home, we go to bed, and 2:30 in the morning I am awoken by a feeling, and it just kind of felt like in the mother world, I guess the pregnancy world, it's called fire crotch, when you have a lot of pressure that happens suddenly on your vagina or in your birth canal. And that's what I felt like I was having, and it woke me up. It was 2:30 in the morning. So I look at my phone, and I don't really move. I just look at my phone. I'm sleeping on my right side, and I kind of just chalk it up to nothing, and I go back to sleep, or attempt to go back to sleep. And within seconds, water was coming out of me. And that's when I knew that it was my water that had broken. So I asked my husband to turn on the light. And my husband, as I've mentioned in previous videos, is a rock hard sleeper. So he gets up to turn on the light, and so the switch is here, but we have a fan that has a remote that we turn the light on and off. So we both get into bed, and then we hit the button and it shuts off the light. So when he came over to the switch, it was humorous to me, but at the same time I'm freaking out a little bit. And so then he realizes, as he's startled out of sleep, that he needs to get to the remote. So he gets to the remote, turns on the light, and I get out of bed, and I can see there's fluid all over the bed, and as I stand up, it's continuing to come out of me. So we grab towels to clean myself up. Again, I call the on-call and I say, this is what is happening. What do I do? So she calls me back, and it was my midwife again, and she said, go ahead and go into the hospital. It sounds like your water broke, and I will meet you there. And I said, okay. So it probably takes us about 30 minutes or so to get out of the house, packing up the last minute things. It was just a frantic, you go from a dead sleep, it's 2:30 in the morning, and then it's like, holy cow, we need to get to the hospital. So it was quite humorous. My husband was driving my vehicle, and at the time he had a 2-door stick shift car, and so we had the car seat in my vehicle at the time. And so we get into my car, and we are driving to the hospital, and I'm telling him, you do not need to speed. We don't need you getting pulled over and getting a ticket. Just drive, but don't get pulled over. And then as a light would come, he would kind of slow down a little bit in case it turned. I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? You need to get me to the hospital. Like, full-blown contractions had started. I was in so much pain. I was franticing. And of course, I was frantic. Like, I'm a first-time mom. I had no idea what was happening. My water had just broken, and I'm in pain. Just get me to the hospital. Thankfully, there was no traffic. It gets me to the hospital, and we pull into valet. Our hospital does offer valet complimentary. I'm not sure if that happens at most hospitals. I'm not honestly sure, but in our hospital, it is complimentary. So we pull up, and I tell him I'm getting ready to have a baby. And of course, at that time, the only area that you can go into the hospital is at the emergency room because it's during the middle of the night and the rest of the hospital isn't open. And so he said, do you want a wheelchair? And I said, sure, let's, go ahead and get a wheelchair. And in the time that it took the young man to go get a wheelchair and come back, I was like, I'm not sitting here anymore, I just need to walk. So I apologized when he got back and I said, you know what, it's better if I just walk. So my husband grabs all of our stuff and we go into the OBECC, which is the emergency room part of the hospital for women that are pregnant. And they get me into a room and they say, my doctor will be here soon. So I am having contractions in the OBECC. I am vomiting profusely. And my body is just ready to get this baby out of me. So this was Tuesday the 25th, and my C-section was not scheduled until the 27th. So this is 2 days prior to my scheduled C-section. So my midwife gets there, and it's probably about 15-20 minutes after we got to the hospital, and freaking out, and she said, let me go ahead and see how many centimeters were dilated. And she checks me and she doesn't even say anything. She just says, we need to get her upstairs now. And I'm freaking out at this point. And my mom is there and obviously my husband is there. And my mom looks at my midwife and she says, like, what is going on? Like, how many centimeters is she? And she said, she's 6 centimeters. We need to get her upstairs now because the baby was still breech. So this now turns from a scheduled C-section to an emergency C-section. So they literally, just like with Matteo, where he was ready to come out of me, ready to walk right out, Sebastian, was exactly the same. And he was ready to come out. So at the same, they just put me on the bed, the same bed that I was already laying in down in the OBECC, and they took me. Normally they'll bring a bed from the delivery room or from the operating room, not from the operating room. They would bring a bed separate from the OBECC to get me to the location I needed to get to. But in that moment, I was in active labor. I was experiencing contractions. I was 6 centimeters, and they were worried that to prep me for my C-section, that at that point, I was going to be ready to have this baby, and he was still breech. And I will go ahead and just put this in there. My midwife is amazing. She was a labor and delivery nurse before she ever became a midwife, and she actually is a licensed nurse practitioner at this point. So she has so much education, so much experience, and I trusted her with everything. And I still trust her with everything. I won't see anyone but her. She had shared with me that she had delivered babies breech before, but the hospital where I was giving birth is a hospital that doesn't allow women, for the complications that can happen, to deliver babies when they are breech. So we were, on our way up to the room, and the next thing I know, I am swarmed by a team of maybe 10 to 15 nurses. I do not exaggerate. 10 to 15, I couldn't even imagine for them what they were experiencing trying to get me ready for a C-section, and I'm just laying in a bed, contracting, vomiting. I have multiple piercings in each ears. I have jewelry that I don't take off, like my necklace. I don't think I had my rings on, but it was, getting all of the jewelry off of me, getting a blood sample from me to have tested in the lab, setting me up with my IV. I have to sign documents prior to having a C-section or having a baby in that hospital. There were documents that I needed to sign, and this was everything I was supposed to be doing the day after this on Wednesday, which was supposed to be like my pre-testing, getting set up at the hospital. All of that stuff was happening within minutes in the room that I was in, waiting to go into the OR. So they finally get us ready, and they get me into the OR. And obviously when you have a C-section, you can only have one person, and it was clearly my husband. So we get into the operating room, and I have vagal response. So you tell me too much about something, I'm likely gonna pass out. I don't want to know what's happening. Don't talk to me about what's happening. Just do whatever it is that you need to do to get to where you need to go, if that makes any sense. So like, get this baby out of me without explaining to me what you have to do or what's going to happen. So the anesthesiologist was there, and they rushed me into the OR. He was there, and I was just actively contracting, and at this point it was guessed that I was already at 10 centimeters. And I didn't ever have the urge to push like I did with my second son, but I just knew that he was going to need to come out soon. So they get me onto the table in the OR, and they sit me up, and my anesthesiologist, he was amazing, and I think I wasn't nervous to have the epidural or the spinal tap. I wasn't nervous about it because I knew that it would be taking away the pain that I was experiencing and contracting. So I had a nurse in front of me who wanted to hold me down on the table. So like, I was seated like I am now, and she had her hands on my shoulders. And I was in so much pain. One thing for me when I'm contracting, I don't want to be in one position. My body wants me to move and try to manipulate myself to make that pain disappear. So I'm moving all around when I'm laying down, and then she's sitting me up to give me the epidural with her hands on my shoulders. And I was in the middle of I was contracting. So I threw my hands up, like knocking her arms off of my shoulders, and I was like, I do not need you to hold me down. I was in so much pain. I was angry. I was aggressive. I was just ready for this to be, over with. So the contraction passes. The anesthesiologist is behind me to give me the epidural, and I have the woman in front of me, the nurse in front of me that I had just cussed out. And she was helping me breathe and try to stay calm, and I was mid-contraction, and the epidural went through, and I have never felt anything more glorious than that pain disappearing from my body. So they lay me down on the table, and I don't feel anything at this point, and because it is a spinal tap, they can kind of position you so it's supposed to be from the breastbone down that you don't feel anything. And I could still feel a little bit here in my ribs, so they kind of like tilted me back this way. My head was here to kind of get the epidural, the spinal tap, whatever it is, to go in, further up into my body so that I couldn't feel anything. So at that point, the on-call doctor that works with my doctor's office was there, and my midwife was able to assist him in the C-section, which was amazing because she had seen me my entire pregnancy. She had been at both of the hospital visits that I had previous to having this baby, and I trust her with my life. So they have a sheet that goes in front of you, and my husband was here to the left of me. And then they drop that down when the baby comes out, and it's a clear sheet to still keep everything, separated. But at the same time, I was able to see everything that was happening. And my husband took a lot of pictures. Again, I said I will insert them at the end of the video. But they pulled Sebastian out, and he had his umbilical cord wrapped around his neck twice. And in that moment, I knew that I had made the right decision to not try to manipulate the position that he was in any more than I had been able to. So to do the spinning baby exercises, you really have to be in optimal position physically to be able to flip the baby, because at this point they're getting so big, there's barely any room for them to be able to flip. And so I'm grateful that I did not attempt the ECV because it could have been detrimental to the health of my child. And I am so incredibly grateful that I had that feeling or intuition to not try to manipulate the position that he was in. So anyway, Sebastian comes out crying, and I just lose it. I'm in tears. It was the greatest feeling ever. We were parents to a healthy little boy. He was 7 pounds even, 21 inches. And he was born at 5:23 a.m. on July 25th, 2017. Little boy made me a mom, and I couldn't be more incredibly grateful. The C-section, recovering from the C-section was difficult to say the least. I had a catheter in. I was not able to move around for 24 hours after that. My husband changed his first diaper, which was something that was really hard for me. I wanted to be able to experience that. And as a mother, I wanted to see this baby that had been inside of me for 9 months, and I wanted to see his body in his entirety. And I couldn't do that until I was able to get up and move around. So needless to say, the recovery from having a C-section was difficult for me. I wouldn't change it for the world, because that's how I had my son, and that's what got him to be here with us today. And I'm grateful for the team of doctors that I had, and the nurses, and everyone that was so diligent about making sure that everything went smoothly, or smooth as it could be when this little boy decided he was going to make his appearance. So that was my birth story for Sebastian Enrique Arrieta, born July 25th, 2017, changed our lives forever. And I'm forever grateful for him and all of the support that I had and have had in his 2 years of raising that crazy little boy. Thank you so much for watching. That was my birth story on having my first son, Sebastian, via C-section, emergency C-section. If you like this, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell to be notified every time I upload if you're interested in mommy lifestyle videos. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.